age of metal and stone has all but ended on Azeroth. The growing civilization of the Titan Forged is all but brought to ruin. Now in its place a new empire will rise. From the wild lands and forests the Troll emerge. But can this new civilization stand the tests of time? Don't forget to like and subscribe and come. Take a seat by the fire as we journey to the heart of a new empire. The ripe lands of the world flourished. The hunter-gathering trolls were perfectly poised to reap the majority of the world's bounty. They were strong and resilient, possessing unique regenerative qualities that allowed them to eventually heal from most injuries that would send other mortals to the grave. These trolls were also highly superstitious. They had formed a close bond with the wild gods. These were demigod-like spirits that took the form of animals to protect the natural world. The trolls would call them Loa, and their society would develop with absolute reverence to these beings. While there were many early tribes and settlements, the trolls would often migrate rather than settle. This was, however, until they came upon a series of mountain plateaus on the southern side of the centre of the continent. These mountain peaks were especially sacred to the trolls, due to the many Loa that they revered, calling them home. One powerful tribe laid claim to these mountains before all others. This was the Zandalari tribe. They were deeply spiritual, laying claim to these mountains and designating them as holy ground. They would build many temples and shrines to their gods, the Loa, atop their peaks, eventually founding a glorious temple city that would be known as Zandalari. With no one to contest them, except each other, many other tribes began to spread out, claiming their own territories, and even beginning to rival the power of the mighty Zandalari. Some of these tribes were the Gurubashi, the Drakari, and the Amani. While this was a time of peace, there were some battles fought amongst the tribes, often over territory. However, the trolls were skilled and savage fighters. War was costly for both sides. It was in each tribe's best interest to settle disputes in other ways, or simply withdraw. There were, however, many internal struggles for power. This mighty civilization was ever growing. Amongst those who were ousted by another was a Gurubashi witch doctor named Zando. He harbored dreams of revenge and power against those whom he believed had taken his rightful place. While this was not all that uncommon, Zando was in possession of something unimaginably dangerous. An ancient blade from the old world, possessed of its own will from the days when the world was young. It was Xal'atath, the blade of the Black Empire. The darkness contained within would whisper and guide the troll, leading him eventually to a dark mound of blackened earth. The Loa had long warned of this place to their faithful. They must not journey to it, for terrible danger resided within. Zando and his group of outcasts would not be deterred by the warnings. His lust for power overwhelmed his better sense. Dark blood rituals were performed, until one day, the very earth beneath their feet began to stir. Nothing but bones would be found of Zando and his misguided trolls that followed him, but the darkened mound hid something terrible beyond words. A Sithraxi general emerged once more from its slumber. Many ages ago, it was wounded in a battle against the Keeper Tyr. Now rejuvenated, it surveyed this now changed land. It looked upon the Troll Empire in disgust, seeing nothing but a ghost of the once mighty Black Empire that encapsulated the world. It would see it wiped clean, to pursue its ultimate goal of releasing its dark masters, to cover the world in a second sickness. It began within, as Kithik reached outward with its mind. It sensed the burrowed army of the Aqir, the ones that still thrived in the underground kingdoms. driving them into a frenzy. They would beat the sounds of war. Their numbers swelled, and preparations were made as it began to plot the methods of attack. Once ready, and with the overwhelming numbers advantage, they swarmed the troll territories. The trolls were wholly unprepared for such an assault. They suffered many losses in the first few battles of that fateful war, but they would not go down without a fight. Many tribes had already fallen, but the Zandalari gathered the 3 strongest of the troll tribes and united them under a single banner named the Empire of Zul. The Aqir were like an ocean tide washing over the outer territories, pushing ever deeper towards the mountain center of the civilization. But from atop this vantage point, the Zul Empire could scout the movements of the Aqir. Being so numerous made them less agile in reacting to engagements, and so began a campaign of guerrilla warfare. From the jungles and forests, they would ambush parties of the Aqir and instill confusion. As the army moved to defend itself, the trolls would vanish back into the canopy. Meanwhile, the priests would beseech the mighty Loa to grant them power. They would summon them into the world, or use their blessing to grant themselves unbelievable power. A major blow came to the Aqir when another of the Sathraxi moved into Voldun to assault one of the Titan seals holding the old gods at bay. Slaughtering the trolls and their neighbours, the snake-like Sethrek, he would go unchallenged until one of the mighty Loa, a snake spirit named Sethralis, would oppose it. A mighty battle then ensued, neither giving way until at last, in one final desperate act, the Loa gave its life in order to destroy the abominations once and for all. The Sathraxi was still able to destroy the seal and weaken the prison, but Sethralis' followers transported its body to a location nearby and built a temple around it to revere the wild god for the selfless act. But this was only the beginning of the losses for the army of Aqir. Slowly but surely they began to take too many losses. The wild gods were far more powerful than first assumed. Then one day the signal was given to retreat, but the trolls would not give up, and they followed in pursuit. The war had all but ended, but the Zandalari knew that if even a handful survived, they would replenish their numbers and return. 3 of the main tribes that formed the Empire of Zul under the Zandalari command each set out in different directions. The Gurubashi would push southeast to the prison complex of Ankaraj, where the insectoids had taken over the prison and corrupted its guardians. The Drakari pushed far north, almost to the complex of Ulduar, in order to hunt their prey. This left the Amani tribe, that pursued the Sathraxi abomination Kithix itself, to the northeast. Though wounded, it was still a major threat, and the Amani would not retreat. In one final all-out gambit, they assaulted the beast directly, and finally, the battle was won. They had only scarce few left from their tribe, but they would earn themselves a legendary reputation, building their first city atop the very site where they felled the beast. The insectoids retreated in complete defensive posture, with no will left to fight. The trolls remained in these new locations to keep watch, and eventually grew distant from each other, and even in time forgetting the need for the Empire of Zul in the first place. The trolls had survived, and they believed they had conquered the continent for themselves. However, around the same time, some strange events were happening elsewhere. The curse of flesh was still spreading rapidly throughout the Titan Forge that had remained free. Some of the clans of the Vrykul not only turned to flesh, but their offspring began to be born stunted, much smaller, seen as weak by the rest of its members. They would hear rumours of a promised land to the south where Tyr had journeyed, and many would leave to search for it, only to realise it was nothing but a myth. Far to the south of the continent this time, another group of Titanforged would begin to be afflicted by the curse of flesh also. This time it was the Mogu, normally under the guidance of the powerful Titan Keeper Ra. These soldier Titanforged were mighty, but Ra had long since retreated from the world, fearing the Pantheon was truly dead. The vicious Mogu began to turn on each other. Many factions would rise up and fight for dominance. This would be known as the Age of 100 Kings. But under their noses while this was happening, newer races began to spring up in an area known as the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, spurred on greatly by it being the location of coalescing lifebloods from Azeroth itself. This would be the monkey-like Savage Hosen, the deeply spiritual fish people the Jinyu, and the enigmatic Pandaren. They would each call a part of this new area home. However, this was only the beginning of their tale. There is so much more to come. So thank you to everyone for all the support as always. I cannot express how much it means. But for now, don't forget to come back anytime.